The Telegraph misleads readers on climate change impact, and it rules that the press watchdog in a rare slapdown. We're going to read into this more from Byline Times, you guys. Let's go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Reganelite here with an article from Byline Times with the headline that the Telegraph misled readers on climate change impact, and it rules that the press watchdog in a rare slapdown. The 6-month battle sees the Telegraph forced to correct an inaccurate article about the impact of climate change on rail delays. Guys, while you're here, make sure you hit the like button and share it across social media so others are notified of this video. So before I give my thoughts, let me just show you the headline from the Telegraph originally. This is the original headline from them. Falling weather delays undermine rail chief's climate warning. Network Rail said it was spending £2.8 billion to help it cope with extreme weather and climate change. As of right now, the headline remains the same on the rule against the Telegraph article at the time of this writing. The Daily Telegraph clearly don't want to talk about the issues of climate change here, do they? No, doesn't appear to be. Or at least if they do want to talk about it, they want to try and tie it into a means of things that it's going to cost more in order to do so. Daily Telegraph, while I do use use it for every now and then on stories, and I don't prefer not to use it on stories, but sometimes I do feel that some stories are probably worth you guys taking. And I normally, whenever I get stories from the Telegraph, I always say to take them with a pinch of salt anyway. And the Daily Mail is not a proper news outlet, so that's why I never use them. I don't care what their stories are; they have zero credibility. And I know Telegraph has very low credibility. However, still a good chunk of proportion of people out there still read the Telegraph. They still buy its subscriptions. They still listen to it, whether you like it or not. They still have influence. To say this is Daily Mail, but either way, I thought this was a really important one to highlight to people about the dangers of newspapers and newspapers misleading people with headlines. And we've seen this quite a few times actually in the papers. And I've seen this from other YouTubers have talked about this as well, where they've given you a headline, they slapped a headline in front of you, but when you read the context, it says something completely different. And the Telegraph are not the only ones who have slightly mislead as well. I even think the Guardian has done this a few times as well with their headlines, and I've covered in some of my videos as well. So I always say sometimes to take them with a pinch of salt as well. The I newspaper have gotten things wrong. As I had a story I covered about them once, and I had to roll back on it because their story was actually in fact wrong. You can't always be 100% accurate. Now, no newspaper, no media is 100% perfect. And I would not brush Byline Times in with the same with some of the other outlets, because they're not owned by a billionaire, which is probably be a good which is a good starter as well. But I know some people are going to say in the comments, Byline Times, they're communist left wing propaganda machine, when you can't win with some of these people no matter what. Does this mean that the Telegraph are going to change their ways as a result of this? No. What you're probably going to get is probably a small imprint in their paper somewhere saying that this article at this date was misleading. Because of the way the system works, it should be the case, front page on their paper saying, we misled you on this day because of this and this and that, and we apologize unreservedly. But you won't get that. That's what it should be for all newspapers when they mislead people, but that's not going to be the case, unfortunately. But it is a good indicator that perhaps the Telegraph will probably avoid climate change, because obviously unless they can find a reasonable way to turn people against it in some way, shape or form, or try to anyway, that is for sure. So let's read this story, guys. So the Daily Telegraph has been found to have misled readers about the impact of climate change on Britain's railways following a ruling by the UK's press self-regulated body. Following a 6-month back and forth with the climate think tank, the Independent Press Standard Organisation, IPSO, has now upheld a complaint against the newspaper over an article published in April this year, which claims that there have been a fall in weather-related delays on the rail network. The story claimed that it eroded the rail network's chief warnings over the impact of climate change on the sector. Now, how does how so exactly? But in response to the complaint from the non-profit Energy and Climate Intelligence Unit, which tackles misinformation on the climate crisis, Ipsos found that the article's headline and opening sentence were misleading and not supported by the article. The report, titled "Fall in Weather Delays Eroded Rail Chief's Climate Warnings," suggesting that weather-related train disruption had decreased in recent years, supposedly contradicting warnings from Network Rail's chief executives about the growing impacts of climate change on railway infrastructure. However, Ipsos' ruling stated that while the percentage of weather-related delays among total delayed minutes had fallen between 2020 and 2023, there had actually been an increase in the total delayed minutes related to weather during this period. The complaint was brought by the Energy and Climate Intelligence Unit, the ECIU, an NGO that supports informed debate on energy and climate change issues. The ECIU argued that the Telegraph's article was misleading in several aspects, including its presentation and data and its interpretation of trends in weather-related rail disruptions. In its ruling, Ipsos Complaints Committee has said the committee acknowledges the complaints concerns that the headline and article were misleading and referred to a falling or a fall in weather delays. The regulator added the committee noted that the article set of data actually showed that while the percentage of weather-related delays were falling amongst total delay minutes from 2020 to 2023, there had been an increase in total delay minutes relating to weather. Ipsos ordered the Telegraph to publish a correction acknowledging that its analysis did not show overall rate-related delay minutes were decreasing, but rather their share in the total of delayed minutes was decreasing. Both the Energy and Climate Intelligence Unit and Network Rail pointed out that the 4 years covered saw a major increase in disruption caused by strike action amid waves of national and localised strikes on the network. This contributed to the overall number of disruptions on the rail network soaring, meaning that the cause of rail chaos for such as extreme weather became relatively less pronounced, even while recording minutes of disruption overall from extreme weather increased. So, yeah, the disruption to obviously train disruptions, the strikes, those kind of things, they definitely have to remember, obviously back then, early in the year, they definitely had an impact, and we know fully aware of that. The correction appeared in the newspaper's Correction and Clarifications column on Friday the 18th of October. Ipsos told the paper to present the correction as a standalone item on the website homepage for 24 hours and be added to the original article. The ruling comes at a time of increasing scrutiny of media coverage of climate change issues. Yet the Watchdog rarely rules on complaints. According to its latest report, the vast majority of complaints do not result in a ruling. This is the problem. This is a major problem. We need the medias to be held accountable. We need these newspapers to be held accountable. They still have an influence on the British public. I know some people mainly use their terms of covering news and whatnot online now, but they still have an influence. And there are young people who are being influenced by some of these papers. There needs to be more accountability. That's one thing definitely needs to happen. ECIU believes that it is the first article relating to climate change that has been found to breach the Ipsos Editor's Code since 2020. A quote from the right-wing campaign group the Taxpayer Alliance in the piece also claimed that climate change was a problem that is having less and less of an impact on the network. ECIU argued that this was inaccurate, as proven by calculations outlining the total delayed minutes relating to extreme weather alone. But Ipsos ruled that newspapers such as are entitled to publish the views of individuals, provided that they are distinguished as such. The climate group which complained pointed out that the total delayed minutes relating to weather are actually increasing according to Network Rail data. They argue that the general trend shows weather-related disruptions are on the rise, contrary to the impression given by the Telegraph article. Media reform group Hacked Off raised concerns about the length of time it took for the correction to be issued. ECIU wrote to Ipsos on the 10th of April to complain about the article. After 4 months of deliberations, the complaint was upheld, but the Telegraph demanded an independent review of the process. The Ipsos basically telling them that they need to change it. That review found no flaws in the process, but further delayed the correction. In that time, many people have seen the flawed story, digesting the misleading claim, and led it to spread, the ECIU had warned. The Telegraph, in its defence, argued that its data analysis was based off official figures from the Office of Rail and Road, the ORR, and that it made clear in the article that it was referring to a falling proportion of delays attributed to weather, autumn, and structure, not falling delays due to weather overall. However, Ipsos ruled that the headline and first sentence were still misleading and required correction. The regulator noted that while newspapers are entitled to interpret data and publish opinions, they must ensure that the headlines are supported by the text and significant inaccuracies are promptly corrected. An ECIU spokesperson told Byline Times climate change is an issue that ranks highly on the public's list of concerns, so it's important that efforts are made to present them with accurate information. It is unfortunate in this instance that more people will have read the original article than will see the corrected version. Nadine Sparks, CEO of Hacked added, "It is extraordinary that it took Ipsos 6 months to address this, to address an evidently misleading headline. You know that Ipsos board is dominated by the national newspapers themselves, including the Daily Telegraph publisher, whose deputy chairman sits on the body which controls Ipsos rules. The public are being denied access to reliable, factual, and evidence-based information about the climate crisis by national newspapers. Low standards of persistence with sham regulations and by politicians' failure to legislate an alternative," Sparks said. Labour made no mention of reforming media regulation in its manifesto this year, to the disappointment of some campaigners. The Telegraph is currently in the process of being sold, reportedly to the owner of a small online tabloid in the New York Sun, Dave Offin. Telegraph's media group was contacted for comment. And obviously, guys, understandably so, they have not responded. But this is currently the headline that's still left on them since they published this story, which is on Monday for a reference as well, guys. But they don't care, especially if the body is actually controlled by some of the journalists. Like, you have somebody, so the deputy chair, which including the deputy chair publisher, is the Daily Telegraph. Like, that's just like, they're regulating themselves essentially. That's not right. It should be independent that regulates them. But I mean, like, it's extremely frustrating. And especially on climate, guys, when climate, we know, is a very serious issue and one to be taken seriously. Yes, there will be the certain trolls in the chat who will try to deny it, and that's fine. That's all right, because they live in a hole, and then they don't know what's happening in the real world. But for those who are on the right side of this story, we need to make sure that we deny these people who are trying to bring down or try to play down the impact of climate change. And it's important that it's not misled in any way, shape, or form. Obviously, it's a bit more difficult to control an environment such as social media. But while newspapers are still out there and can still mislead, and that they have some form of regulation, we need to call it out whenever they possibly can. Like we said, we need to apply pressure on the Labour government to make the changes to media as quick as possible. But without media reform, we will always have a huge amount of disinformation out there, and people always in the narrative that they'll believe whatever some of these papers will give to them, even though that a lot of them are misleading or just flat out lies. But what do you guys make of this story? What do you guys make of the Telegraph misleading its readers and its continuous denial to change its headlines, even though the facts have been pointed out to them? Let me know your thoughts and more on this down in the comment section below. If you found this video informative, please hit the like button. We greatly appreciate it. Share this across social media so others are notified of this video. If you haven't subscribed already, please consider subscribing, because it really does help support the channel. Now, if you want to go one step further and financially support me and the work that I do here on this channel, you can do so by becoming a YouTube member for as little as 99p. Or you can even join me on Rumble or Patreon for exclusive content on those platforms. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to catch you all very, very soon.